Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monsters Den, and happy St. Patrick's Day to all of our Irish friends out there and our non-Irish friends, because most people take part in St. Patrick's Day. There we go. Today we've got a pretty fun show for you, but before we get to the topic, let's introduce the panel. We've got in the co-captain's chairs today, Mr. Craig Kaminski, and the king himself, Chris Allo.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you guys.
Hey, guys. Great to see you. And happy St. Patrick's Day. Top of the morning to you, laddies.
That's right.
Happy
That's
St.
right.
Patrick's Day.
I got my green, the only green shirt
I got
own
my-
in the wardrobe.
I am not wearing green. I am wearing my Paul Naschy shirt. And yes, the curse applies to shirts because I do have two of this same exact Paul Naschy shirt.
Wow, I had no idea he had one.
Yeah. This is from Werewolf vs. the Vampire Woman, also known as La Noche de la Walpurgis, or whatever the hell it says there.
Yeah.
El hombre lobo.
I gotta get one of those. Very cool.
Yeah.
So there you have it, everybody. That's the topic of the day is Paul Naschy, I wouldn't say world famous, but among horror aficionados, I would say he's a very notable figure, long labeled the Spanish Lon Chaney Jr. And I will say it's been well documented from himself that when he was growing up, he was a huge fan of the Universal horror films, and specifically Lon Chaney Jr. And he set out in his career to do these homages to the great horror icons of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and at over 100 films, I think he did.
Yeah, between writing, starring, directing, he had over 100 films. And I think specifically it was Frankenstein versus the Wolfman that he saw as a young child in the theater. I think it was 1946. Yeah, it changed his life.
Yep. And he left us in 2009, like we said, with over 100 films. And what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks is we've been watching and rewatching as many Paul Naschy films as we possibly can to come up with our top 5 favorites. So needless to say, I'm sure we haven't seen all these films, not even close. 100 is a lot, but we've picked out our 5 favorites, and we'll probably do, I guess, some honorable mentions and maybe some absolute stinkers at the end, time permitting. So we'll have Chris kick us off with his, I guess, number 5.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I went through my collection and just pulled the Naschy stuff off the rack. And then with streaming, there's tons more. I mean, there's tons and tons of options. And I definitely did get the feeling from watching a lot of these Naschy movies in a row, and I have watched a lot in the last couple of weeks. Like, holy shit, there's some great movies, and holy shit, there's some fucking garbage, which we'll get to. And a lot of the times, I kind of felt like I was watching the same movie over and over again.
You probably were.
I mean, but there's just a lot of tropes that Naschy does. I mean, right? There's always tons of beautiful women. There's always a beautiful girl that falls in love with him with like 5 minutes into the movie. You know, when it's a werewolf movie, he turns into the werewolf for the first time, like 25 minutes. Of course, for him to be killed, he's got to be killed by the woman who loves him, which is why he's got to fall in love with the girl in like the first 10 minutes of the movie. I mean, it's just stuff like that. When you start watching them back to back, it's like, wow, guy, yeah, I think I feel like I watched this one. I mean, like Fury the Wolfman, I said before we went live, I watched it recently 3 different times. I was like, holy crap, I would watch it. But anyway, all right, so I thought my list was going to be all the werewolf movies because, yeah, that's another thing, a realization I came to, not much different for me than Christopher Lee. Like, I love Christopher Lee. I'll watch anything he's in, especially the horror stuff. But I gotta be honest, without question, it's the Dracula series that I love, and I'll rewatch over and over again. And a lot of the other stuff just doesn't really catch my attention as much. Same thing with Naschy's werewolf series. Man, like the first 8 are fucking awesome. And the first 8 in that series are great, but a lot of the other stuff he did, there's a lot of crap in there. But this one I had seen years ago and hated it. but I got the Blu-ray anyway. And I watched it when it came out, when I first got it, like maybe a year ago, and I hated it. So then I watched it again a third time, and I loved it. It is so batshit crazy. And then I found out that it was actually one of Naschy's favorite movies. It's from 1974, Count Dracula's Great Love. This is a great Blu-ray put out by Vinegar Syndrome. The movie came out in 1974. Was also released in the U.S. under the title Cemetery Girls, which gets confusing because there's a terrible John Carradine Filipino vampire movie called Vampire Hookers, which was also released as Cemetery Girls. So that gets confusing. Long story short, 4, of course, knockout, beautiful girls get stranded at a castle that's run by an older guy named Dr. Marlowe. And of course, as you watch the movie, you quickly figure out, oh, Dr. Marlowe just happens to be Dracula. And Dracula wants, I guess his daughter's dead, so he wants to resurrect his daughter by using one of the girls. And one by one, he bites the girls, and there's another vampire, and there's lots of vampire action. But, it's got that awesome 70s charm. But there's also just some stuff, I guess we should say, too. Like Paul Naschy movies, it's kind of like the mix of Hammer films. Like it's got the gothic trappings of the Hammer films, but also the blood and the guts and the batshit craziness of Euro horror, like all the stuff from Italy. Like I'm watching, there's one part, right? Like there's these two vampire girls have the virgin girl that they're carrying through like a barn. And all of a sudden the farmer comes out with a pitchfork and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing? Leave her alone." So the 2 vampire girls just drop her and she just hits the ground. And then later in the movie, Paul Naschy as Dracula is walking with a girl, and he's in, like, of course, one of these awesome gothic castles, and he's at the top of the stairs, and somebody yells at him or something. Oh, what's he do? He drops the girl, and she just rolls down the steps. I mean, both times I burst out loud laughing. I was like, this is hysterical. But there's lots of great nudity, of course, lots of gore. It's very funny, batshit crazy. But yeah, the third time was the charm, and I did really enjoy Count Dracula's Great Love. I think it's also, this might have come out, was it Count Dracula's Last Love, I think, or something? I forget. They're like with all these movies too, there's a million titles.
Yeah.
Everything just got retitled like crazy between translations and producers just being like, oh, fuck it, let me just rename it whatever. But this one, I
named him for every territory that it was released.
Every territory, yeah.
Game, so it's crazy trying to keep
this one was a hoot. Of course, there's always, it has it right on the cover. Which again, until I'd really watched a lot of Naschy movies back to back, like I didn't really realize how much like S&M stuff, like S&M eroticism was in these movies. Like every single movie, Paul Naschy gets chained up, but like also in almost every movie, there's a beautiful girl that gets chained up and whipped, and her clothes get torn off and
blood drained.
Yes. Lots of times it's another beautiful woman that's the villain, and she's whipping the beautiful woman in chains. So yeah, once I started watching so many, I was like, wow, yeah, I really started seeing these recurring themes, over and over again. Yeah. Lots of voodoo and occultism and just but besides, of course, all the monsters.
And he must have been having the time of his life making all these films, because he gets to get naked with these ladies.
All the ads that he gets.
I mean, every movie is like 3 or 4 beautiful women. Like I said, every movie there's a beautiful girl that's fallen in love with him. They're like Waldemar, like in all the we should say in all the werewolf movies, it's Waldemar Daminsky is his name, and it's always like Waldemar, I love you, and I'm like, wait, we're like 10 minutes of screen time.
Just met.
Like how did that happen? I can't even remember which one it is now. but it's definitely one of the werewolf movies. Like some, husband and wife, and he's like an old dude, and they're in a car, and they get attacked by bad people in Spain, which happens in a lot of these movies, like robbers in Spain. The husband gets killed. Naschy takes the girl to his castle, and like 5 minutes later, she's like, forget the husband. She's like, well, Waldemar, I love you. Like, what about Joe Bag of Donuts, the husband who you just got married? I forget him.
And he's in a threesome in one of these films. I'm like,
oh yeah. I mean, but listen, besides being the star of the movie, he also wrote a lot of these.
Yeah.
And
so I mean, hell, if I was writing, I would write stuff for me too. Yeah. One thing I learned, which I had never known before, was that the first one he did, Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, was actually written for Lon Chaney.
Yeah.
And they talked to Lon Chaney people, but they were like, 1968, they're like, he's too old.
Yeah, he's way too old.
Yeah. Way too old. But I had no idea that was his original intent, was just to be the writer.
And look how that turned out.
Hells yeah.
Yeah.
Well, more about that one later.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, Craig, what do you got?
All right. And so for my, and because there were so many of these movies, I had to pull a twofer for my number 5. So in a tie for my number 5, my first one is called 7 Murders for Scotland Yard. This is a kind of a giallo movie that was made in 1971 in Italy, released 71 in Italy, 72 in Spain, 76 in America. And it's also known as Jack el Destripador de Londres, or Jack the Ripper of London. Naschy plays, of all things, a former trapeze artist. You heard that right. Who he walks with a limp because they show in a flashback scene that he fell, and so that he lost his job as a trapeze artist. And he is the husband of victim number 2. And as the title of the movie says, there is 7 victims total. And almost all the one disappointing thing about this, why I have it ranked a little lower, there's no nudity, despite almost every victim is a hooker. So there's no nudity, and just like in a lot of the giallo movies, the killer is taunting the police. He's calling them up and egging them on and everything. But it's a decent enough whodunit that kind of keeps you guessing a little bit. And they were semi-creative with some of the kills. So that one I watched on, I want to say on YouTube. Yeah, that was on YouTube. So again, it's called 7 Murders for Scotland.
Gotta have a 7 in the title, right? Perfect.
Yes. It's giallo. Yes. And I was going to say, as far as the nudity goes, Craig, there's alternate versions for everything. Like on these the Blu-ray sets.
Yeah. I found that out in my course of watching.
Yeah, like for each movie, they present it uncut with the nudity, but then on the deleted scenes, they reshot the same exact scene with the actors wearing clothes.
Yeah, so, this one was dubbed in English with English subtitles. Right. I'm pretty sure. So not all of them are like that.
Right.
So,
yeah. So there could be a version out there with some boobs in it.
But this particular one, it was pretty clear on YouTube also. Some of them, even some of the ones, they look like snuff films. They're so dark or you can't see anything. They're really, the quality is just not there. But this one's not that bad. And tied for my other number 5 was from 1972 and released in the U.S. in 1974 as The Hanging Woman. This is also known as La Orgia de los Muertos, or Orgy of the Dead.
Right.
And also Beyond the Living Dead, Return of the Zombies, and Terror of the Living Dead. And this one, Naschy is not the main character in this. Little different for him. He plays a grave robber / groundskeeper who may or may not be a necrophiliac. And of course, his name is Igor. Of course,
Of course.
naturally.
Of course, because what else would he be named?
What else would you be named? And so the general plot of the movie is the main character is played by Stelvio Rossi. He inherits his uncle's estate, and on the way to the estate, he comes upon a hanging woman. And so you assume that she's committed suicide. Turns out she was murdered. And while he makes his way to the estate, he also discovers that a mad scientist is living in the basement and conducting experiments to raise the dead. So there's, again, a decent enough whodunit as to who killed the hanging woman and why is all of this craziness going on inside the house. There's a handful of pretty women in it, has some nudity, not as much as some of the other ones that I've seen, but again, with zombies and with some trying to figure out who the killer is and everything, it makes enough for a decent movie. So again, that's my second, tied for my number 5, The Hanging Woman.
Nice.
Yeah, I do want to, we were talking before about how a lot of these Blu-rays, they'll have like 2 different cuts. They'll have the like the unrated cut or the, whatever they call it on the various discs. And those are usually the scenes with all the nudity. But you ever notice like some of those scenes that they add in are awful quality? Like you can definitely see like they have really inferior source material. So like you'll have this great looking Blu-ray and then all of a sudden the nude scene will pop in, or they'll start to do something and then all of a sudden it'll cut in. You'll have Naschy and the girl both be with no clothes on. And it's like worse than any DVD or VHS tape you've ever seen before.
Yeah. I was starting to say earlier, I watched Fury of the Wolfman 3 different times. And one of them was because Craig had mentioned there was no nudity. So one of them that I watched, that was on YouTube, had all the nudity was cut out. Then there was another version that I found that I watched where the nudity, where the print looked really good, and it was just like you're saying, Pete. Somebody had spliced in the nude scenes, the quick nude scenes from an inferior print, so you could totally tell. And then while I was going through my collection, I was like, what the hell is this? The Wolfman Never Sleeps. So I put it on and I was like, oh, this is Fury of the Wolfman.
Fury of the Wolfman.
So this was the Swedish version, which has all the nudity intact, but it's all the same. It's not great, but it's all the same quality, because the Swedish version apparently was the only uncut one. But again, on some of these movies we're talking, from the early 60s and even from the late 60s rather and early 70s, nudity was different back then in films. It hadn't really taken off, just like for these Naschy movies, like it was like the mid 70s where they started to have female genitalia on screen, because Penthouse and Playboy decided to have fully naked women in magazines, and now they were doing it in movies. Yep. Plus, porn became such a big thing in the mid 70s to the early to mid 70s in theaters. So yeah, you could definitely see that sort of changing as you go through the series, for sure.
Yeah. And I was a complete rookie to Naschy before watching any of these movies. So I was quick to learn that, wait, this one doesn't have any nudity in it. And I went onto a website that actually had pictures right next to each other. This is from the cut version, and this is from the uncut. Here she has a nightgown on, and here she doesn't. And so I quickly learned, try to do some research on these, and if at all possible, go for the unrated version.
Yeah, there's so many versions of these, so many.
Yeah, and often you don't know what you're watching until you get there. And of course, if you've never seen it, you wouldn't know if you're missing nudity or not.
Right.
Yeah. Or the gore, because some of these films are pretty gory, some not at all, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. 100% right.
All right. So my number 5 is from 1973. This will be my lone non-Vladimir Daninsky werewolf flick out of all these. Hunchback of the Morgue.
Oh, yeah.
Which is right there, and that's part of this Paul Naschy collection too. This movie is out of control. It's out of control. I think it's one of the gore. Oh, you have it in a
I got the DVD and the Blu-ray.
Wow. Probably one of the goriest films, I think, out of a lot of the ones that I've seen. And I would say if it's very different from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? The classic film. So basically he plays this he plays a hunchback, obviously. He's got a really bad wig on, which is just totally ridiculous. He's got so many wigs in all these films. Like you never know like what's his hair or what's not. But he works in, he's like a, he works in like this kind of like morgue, right? It's kind of like a hospital morgue. They're doing all these experiments. And of course, in typical hunchback fashion, he's in love with this one woman who's sick. She winds up dying, and they're going to use her body in an experiment on it. Of course, he's in love with her, so he doesn't want that to happen. And the head doctor at this place, doctor scientist, whatever you want to call him, he's like busy like taking all these body parts and things, and he's like creating this like concoction. What he's actually doing is he's slowly creating this other being, right? This parts, it's really weird. Part of this is like gothic horror, part of it is almost like kind of sci-fi-ish. And he gets the hunchback to do lots of his bidding. So the hunchback like is part sympathetic character and part just like out of control maniac, but he's like, really slow, doesn't have a lot of intelligence. But the weird thing is later in the movie, he like befriends this other woman, and then she like falls in love with him, and he's like, and she's making out with the hunchback. And it's just like, in what reality would this ever happen? But the kills are great in this film. And then at the end, he has the other doctor brings to life this creature thing, and he winds up fighting the hunchback, and there's like an acid pit.
Oh, right. Yeah,
and it's nuts. This film is just totally nuts. I wouldn't say it's scary or anything like that, but it's a lot of fun. And he plays a pretty good role in this film. He doesn't have a lot of lines. He doesn't talk much at all. And, you could tell it's like a fake hunchback. And sometimes he's walking kind of upright. Other times he's leaning over. And but it's a lot of fun. And if you want like something a little bit different from like all the werewolf films, it's a pretty entertaining one. So Hunchback of the Morgue from 1973 is my number 5.
That's one of the ones I didn't get to see because that was not available anywhere online. But I had read that was one of his real. I believe he won some awards for that. And it was a good moneymaker for him also in Europe. So that's one I wanted to see but didn't get to.
Yeah, it's good. It's you could tell they had a bigger budget for this film, and the sets are kind of nice, and the Blu-ray transfer is really. I mean, it's a really good looking film. But it's don't expect like for any of these films, don't expect intricate plot lines or anything like that. But good stuff, and all these, and there's a lot of really beautiful ladies in this particular film, as there are most of them. So it's good because it's a nice he's played all these horror characters, and of course he had to play a hunchback. He plays a mummy in a couple of them. He plays vampires, werewolves, so on and so forth, zombies. So good to see him doing a hunchback film. It's a lot of fun, and it's like I said, it's one of the gorier ones that I've seen.
Okay.
Nice.
Back to Chris.
Yeah, I have to rewatch that one. I haven't seen that one in a long time. All right, my number 4 is the first Naschy werewolf movie, which every time I say the title, it cracks me up. 1968's Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, which is hysterical because this movie has 2 werewolves, 2 vampires, and no Frankenstein.
No
Frankenstein monster, no Dr. Frankenstein, nothing.
And there's not a lot of bloody terror in it either, right?
No, I mean, there is some blood, but there's, there's some, in the U.S. version, they mention in the beginning of the movie the bloodline to Frankenstein and how it's the wolf monster. Because of course it's a werewolf, but doesn't matter. They're like Pete said, these movies you're not watching them for the plot. That's why these are Spain is really the cousin to Italian horror because it's just batshit crazy. But man, this one is a fucking blast. Like I said, 2 werewolves, 2 vampires. Naschy gets bit, turns into the wolf. He just runs around and he is insane. I mean, he is one of the most, if not the most frightening Wolfman ever, because Naschy was a weightlifter, a champion weightlifter, so he's like built like the Incredible Hulk, but then they cover him up in all this, all the fur and the fangs, and he is just, and he's always drooling. It's either drool, and I don't know how they got that much drool to come out of his mouth, some kind of special effect, or blood when he bites somebody, but he moves so fucking fast. He really cooks.
In most of
them. I'm going to say this, Pete, the early ones, because the later ones, oh yeah, he was slowing down. But the early one, man, he cooks. And I mean, there's this one part in this movie, he like breaks into this hut where there's this hot girl. He bites the hot girl, rips her throat out, drools all over. He grabs her father, but he just starts punching him. Like he just fucking
throws him in the fire.
Throws him in the fire. And he's burning. I'm like, this is fucked up, man. Like, this is the scariest fucking wolf man I've ever seen. Like, go ahead, just bite me, but don't beat me up, for Christ's sake. I mean, but it's funny at the same time. But man, and then this one, there's the two vampires, the guy and a girl. But the vampire guy, he's got like the most flamboyant. Like, what? Like, yeah, Pete's got it. Like he's just the most flamboyant. Like he never had a cape before.
The least scariest vampire you will ever see.
Absolutely, but it's fun. It is fun. Pete's got it there on Blu-ray.
Loves that cape, I tell you that much.
It's a hoot. I did see this in September. I had to look up when it was. September 2017. The guys at Exhumed Films, who of course do the 24-hour show. They had because this was released in 68, 69, in very limited run in 3D in theaters. And the guys from Exhumed Films had a brand new 35 millimeter print struck, which cost, thousands and thousands of dollars in 3D. And they ran it in September 2017 in 3D in Philadelphia. And I was there and it was amazing. It looked so good. And I've always hoped that they would put it out or something on disc, but hasn't happened yet. But maybe at some point, or just run. Of course, now with things going back to normal, maybe run it again. Because man, I would love to see it again. Because this movie is a hoot and a half.
Yeah, I bought this. This is a Spanish bootleg Blu-ray and it looks great. It looks great. So I'm happy with this. But there's no English dub on this, so you can only watch
so it's straight. Is it subtitled?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it looks great, and La Marca del Hombre Lobo is the Spanish title. So.
Yes, which I had to get used to, the Hombre Lobo, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Good debut though. It's
yes.
More on that in a minute. Craig, back to you.
My number 4 is a movie that was released in Spain. It was made in 1973, but not released in Spain until 75. Italy in 77 in Italy, and never in the United States. And this movie is another sort of giallo movie that Naschy had made. This is called A Dragonfly for Each Corpse. Wow. Now, this one was also pretty good. And I think, Pete, you would like this because I know you appreciate these type movies. Naschy plays an inspector, grizzled, cigar chomping, and there's a cross-dressing killer who is going around killing various people and leaving a dragonfly, like a brooch, on the victim, either like on their head or on them, and nobody knows why or who's doing this. Naschy's wife, who's played by Erica Blanc, who was also in The Night Evelyn Came Out of the Grave.
Great film.
She sort of fancies herself as a sleuth also. So she helps out Naschy and in some of her investigations and everything. And plus she has a handful of good nude scenes in it. And so which is always a plus. Again, this is a decent enough whodunit where you're wondering what's going on. There's quite a few there are quite a few red herrings in it where it's a cross-dressing killer. Then at one point you see like a gay guy who is cross-dressing, but that's sort of like to throw you for a loop because it's it's not him. And the climax at the end of the movie takes place on a construction site, and Naschy, of course, has to rescue his wife from the clutches of the killer. But you've got deaths by axe, sword, blade-tipped umbrellas, impaling, and decapitation. So lots of blood and lots of good nude scenes, and a fairly good whodunit to boot. So I think it's a pretty good one. Seek this one and you'll enjoy it again. This was also dubbed into English, but had English subtitles, and this is available on YouTube. Again, a dragonfly for each corpse.
For those watching, if you're expecting like ultra original stuff here,
Nah.
Yeah, no, that's true.
most of these films are fairly derivative of other stuff, but they're a lot of fun, so who cares,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's a good hour, and they don't really truck over an hour and a half, so you're not.
Yeah, most of them are like 80 minutes.
Most of them are
tight movies.
80, 90 minutes tops.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is interesting to know, when I was going through a lot of these and watching them, especially, when I rewatched, like Vengeance of the Zombies, I was like, all right, well, I'm like, obviously Naschy did the monster movies like nobody's business. He did Giallos. I'm like, but why didn't he do like an actual zombie movie, like an Italian style zombie movie, but in Spain? It's considering the international success of Dawn of the Dead and Zombie, and then all the knockoffs. It's real interesting that he didn't give that a shot.
Yeah, because Vengeance of the Zombies is not your typical zombie film. It's almost kind of like a giallo film in spots, because you got the one killing guy with the gloves and the mask and shit.
It's very much like a giallo, but with like voodoo zombies.
Yeah,
because they raise the dead, but they just go strangle everybody. They're not eating anybody.
No.
There's better looking zombies, more traditional Romero-esque zombies in Horror Rises from the Tomb.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not like a big part of the movie. But yeah, I was thinking that the other day, like, oh man, he probably would have made a really good, zombie type movie, but yeah, never did. Just interesting, he never did it.
Yeah. All right, my number 4, Chris has already mentioned Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, Mark of the Werewolf, the first film, or La Marca del Hombre Lobo, the first one, as Waldemar Doninsky. You ever wonder why? I'm assuming Waldemar Doninsky is like a Polish name. You ever wonder why a Spanish guy, Spanish film in Spain, they're always, why not come up with like a Spanish character, right?
Apparently back then the censors were so tough that's why the movies were never they were never in Spain. They were always somewhere else, and that's why he's got this name that sounds like Polish, because he wasn't supposed to be Spanish, because apparently if he was a Spanish guy running around the Spanish countryside ripping out women's throats, apparently the Spanish censors would give him grief about that.
Wow. Okay.
But if he made it a guy with a Polish sounding name and said it in France or Germany or wherever the hell else, for whatever reason, which this makes no sense, they were okay with it. Go figure. And I forget, he got the name from the Waldemar Doninsky was from one of the names was from a weightlifter that he was fond of. And like the Paul Naschy, I think Paul he got from the Pope, and Naschy I think was from another weightlifter.
Yeah,
if I remember right.
Yeah, because that's what he did when he was much younger, before
right.
films. Yeah, but this is a good debut. It's funny after you watch like a bunch of the werewolf films. Yeah, and I think he talks about that. I read a couple interviews with him where, depending on how much budget they had, that's how good or bad the werewolf makeup looked. Because some of these films, the makeup looks fantastic, and others, I'm like, That doesn't look too good. I've seen much, much better. And those are usually the films that have like no budget whatsoever. But this one, it's not too, the first film is pretty good. First couple are pretty good, actually. But the scene that Chris was talking about before, if you don't get a chance, it's one of the best scenes in any of these films where he breaks into that little house and kills the daughter, kills the father, throws him in the fire. It's a great scene. He's snarling, he's drooling, his blood all over the place. In case you can't see the first film, don't worry. You watch Fury the Wolfman, they replay the same exact
same scene.
Talking about using stock footage, right?
It's true. It's true.
And it's funny because in that first film, like you said before, he's crouching down, he's running around, you hear him snarling. In Fury the Wolfman, he's walking straight up, slow. He doesn't make any noise at all. I'm like, wait, that's not the same guy. Come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's some of these films, he is an amazing werewolf in his movements, the sounds, the makeup. And others, he's just like a guy with a mask on and furry hands with a long sleeve shirt, shoes, just kind of walking around really slow, like, whatever. But some of them, man, he really plays the part well.
Absolutely.
It depends on how motivated he was. I don't know, but some of them inexplicably just, but this is a good one. The first one's good. Back to you, Chris.
Yes, and that's a great point that you made, Pete, which, I guess I never realized, again, because I'd never watched so many of the werewolf movies back to back, that yes, very similar to, Jason or Freddy or Godzilla. He does look very different in every movie. And yeah, I'm sure that's to do with budget and also the makeup man. But I did notice that there actually was two very distinct looking like werewolf makeups, and I thought it was really cool that on the box set they did both of the different ones. Like on this one is the traditional one that he started out where it's like he's furrier and the hair is like almost reminds me of like not Full Moon High, what was the other one, Teen Wolf. Whereas this one, like in this makeup, he's got the ears are way up high, and in this one really does kind of look more like a mask, and it looks like there's like a cap instead of having long hair that's combed back. It does look like it's like a cap almost, and I mean it's just one of those things like I had never guess I never really realized it before. But anyway, so my number 3 pick, and this is interesting because this is the wrong makeup on the cover. This is the Werewolf and the Yeti, also known as the Werewolf versus the Yeti. And I think this came out originally in 73. It was released in America under the title, which is not a great title, Night of the Howling Beast in 1975. And this is the Blu-ray. This is the old bootleg DVD. And man, I thought this one was a ton of fun. It's quite different enough because they set it in Tibet, and a lot of it is done in the snow. So instead of the sand or the forest, the werewolves run around in the snow, and it's even when it's at night, and there's still enough light bouncing off from the snow. It gives it a very cool look. And there's a Yeti. It gives away right in the foreign title. Basically looks like Chewbacca.
Yeah,
this
he
big tall guy. That doesn't look like Yeti doll. Big tall guy, basically in a crappy Chewbacca costume. Bites a couple explorers. Waldemar winds up in Tibet. And then it completely turns into a werewolf movie. But Waldemar gets captured by these fucking hot witch women who chain him up, torture him. They chain up a bunch of these other hot Spanish women, rip their clothes off. Of course, he turns into a werewolf a bunch of times. There's a big shootout in the middle of the movie, which I thought was really good. There's some great stunt work in this, where people are getting shot and falling off mountains. The werewolf is jumping off of perches and stuff. Man, I think the hottest female of the whole series. Lots of S&M, good nudity, but happy ending. When I got to the ending, I'm like, what? I was like, this isn't the downer 70s ending of all of them. But yeah, this one I thought was just an absolute blast, and yeah, one of my favorites of the all the Naschy movies I saw.
And Paul said that he hated the makeup guy on this film because apparently they didn't have a lot of budget to work with, and he basically blew out the entire budget doing the werewolf makeup, and they had nothing left for the Yeti. So he's like, I
Wow.
hated the way the Yeti looked in that film. Which
Well, see, that makes sense because the Yeti is in the beginning of the movie
and the end,
and then the very end, and it's like, wait,
and they fight for like a minute and a half, if that.
They fight for like a minute, which is another trope from this whole series. Like, man, you know, Naschy's always fighting these other monsters, but they're always like, it's always like a 2-minute fight. There's never enough screen time. It's like, oh, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
But that makes total sense with the budget. Because yeah,
that's a fun one. It is.
Yeah.
All right, Craig.
All right, my number 3, and prepare for batshit crazy. So, in the midst of watching all these movies, I had the Naschy filmography up, and I was trying to find whatever I could available. And sometimes the footage was good, sometimes it wasn't, in foreign language. Just couldn't find some of the ones that I wanted to watch, like the Hunchback one, and like Exorcismo, which I think is in your guys' box sets there, which was not available online or anything. So I didn't get a chance. Yeah, so I didn't get a chance to watch that one. So finally, I saw the little blurb for this movie. It said extremely gory revenge movie, but never released in America. So I thought, oh, let's see if I can find that. And I did. And this is online on YouTube, but I watched this entire movie in Spanish with no English subtitles. So this is one of those movies, it's on YouTube, and I want to see, there's only about 800 and some views. I want to see the views, everyone out there in Sea of Tranquility Land, do what you did for Chris's sock puppets that made
Bang Your Head.
Bang Your Head.
Yes, to pump up the views for this movie, because you will not be disappointed. And it's this movie is called La Noche del Ejecutor, the Night of the Executioner.
You know, I passed that one up a few times. I did see it on YouTube, but did not watch it.
It's like, oh, well, you know, have you ever, thought about when you've seen Death Wish 2 with Charles Bronson, and you thought, you know, I wish those rape scenes were a lot more graphic, and that there was a lot more violence. You're going to get it with this movie. This was filmed in 1988, never released in the U.S., and it was eventually released on video in 1992. So Naschy played, and I'm not giving any plot points away by what I'm going to say, and because this is in the explanation for the movie. Naschy plays a man who is celebrating his 60th birthday with his wife and daughter. They're out at a grocery store getting things for their dinner. While they're there, a gang of street thugs, and there's four men and one woman, follow him back to his home, and they break in while he's literally blowing the candles out on his birthday cake. They proceed then to rape and murder his wife and daughter and cut his tongue out. So Naschy, you actually get to hear his natural speaking voice, but only for about 15 minutes of the movie. He has his tongue cut out and he is left for dead, but he doesn't die.
Of course not.
He comes back, and you get to see Naschy in, however, he was at least I would say in his mid to late 50s, in a total Rocky IV training montage where he is jogging, deadlifting a good amount of weight for his age, you can tell, doing curls, shooting guns, throwing knives into targets, to prepare for the complete fucking crazy rampage that he goes on to kill these people. And even better, the gang is part of a drug dealer group. Their leader is a masked man called the Cobra, who you never see. He's always filmed from here, from the neck down, and you don't know who he is, and it's revealed at the end of the movie who he is. The only time you do get to see his face is when they go to an S&M club and he has a leather mask on. So you don't get to actually see the Cobra's face.
Nice.
So it is a batshit crazy movie. And again, if you speak Spanish, si habla español, bueno. But if you don't, no habla español, you still can pretty much follow what's going on with the movie. It was really good despite the language barrier. And there are shootings, stabbings, children being shot, a castration scene, in addition to Naschy having his tongue cut out, and also tons of nudity. So strap yourselves in and please go out and seek this out on YouTube. La Noche del Ejecutor, Night of the Execution.
Sounds nuts.
You will definitely enjoy it. Even without benefit of, and I probably would have ranked this higher if I would have at least had the benefit of English subtitles.
Right.
But it was that enjoyable. I like revenge movies like this, like your Death Wish movies, or like Ms. 45, movies like that. And this does not disappoint with the rampage that Naschy goes on, and he's silent the whole movie.
That's right around the time where he was doing a lot of. He did a couple of Fu Manchu films, because he also played Fu Manchu.
Yes.
Why not, right? Like the
I
lady.
mean, what didn't this guy play?
He did everything. Yeah,
Crazy.
Yeah.
Everything. And if you remember in the Death Wish movies, when Charles Bronson was going on his rampage, he always had like a knit hat on. In this movie, Naschy wears a fedora, and he has like a leather jacket with knives all around it, so that he can whip them out and throw them at guys. And he's got like a leather trench coat with several guns, in it and everything. Just it is just a crazy movie, but enjoyable and a lot of fun despite the language barrier. So I urge everyone to seek this out.
I will check that out.
Yep, for sure.
Cool. All right, my number 3. This movie is terrible, but it's so much fun. I got to throw that out there. This is from 1969, originally titled La Monstruos del Terror, The Monsters of Terror, otherwise known as Dracula versus Frankenstein. U.S. title, though, is called Assignment Terror. Mm-hmm. And yes, you can see by the cover there, you got a vampire, a mummy, the werewolf, Frankenstein monster, and a hot lady. And show you the back.
And Michael Rennie too. I think that was his last movie.
Yes, the last movie he did. Yep, absolutely. This is a direct homage to, I guess, the Universal films that had, all the monsters in them. This is like your big monster mash, so to speak. And Naschy plays Valdemar Daninsky once again. He's killed in the movie before this, which is Fury the Wolfman, but of course he's not quite dead. I think, is this the film where they take the bullets, the silver bullets, out of his body, and all of a sudden he miraculously comes back to life? Is that this
I thought
one?
that was Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman.
Maybe that was that. So, but they do bring him back to life in this film. I lose track of like how they bring him back to life, because every movie he comes back to life, even though he was killed in the previous film. No different than Lon Chaney. But here they are able to, at least in the beginning of the film, they're able to they have power. The mad scientist guy has power over him. And this film, in addition to being an homage to the Universal films, there's also an element of like the Godzilla films where you have these aliens who gain control of Godzilla and Rodan and, Monster X and whatnot. Very similar here because they're actually aliens.
Totally.
Who they figure their idea to take over the human race here on Earth is to bring back and take control of all these classic monsters. And of course, they don't call the Frankenstein monster the Frankenstein monster. It's like the Farstein or something like that. They changed the name a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they go to Egypt and they find a mummy who is one of the worst
looking mummy ever
we'll ever see. And I don't know how well you can see that, but he looks like a little Chinese guy. And he's short and he's thin. He's got a mummy costume on, but of course, he's got the wraps all over, except there's no wraps on his face. And he looks like an old woman with like blue face.
Yeah, they just smudged some makeup on him.
Right, just put some makeup on it, just walks around, right?
Terrible.
But yet, kills everybody, right? And it's got the worst vampire ever, who's got like this receding hairline, looks like Charles Grodin with fangs, and he's terrible. The Frankenstein monster is not terrible, but he looks like a big weightlifter that they put on some cheap makeup to try and get him to look as close to Frankenstein as possible. In fact, there he is, right there. And then you've got, of course, the werewolf, which I don't think the werewolf makeup is that good in this film because, as you can see here, it doesn't cover up a lot of his face. So he's got like all the hair here and then nothing in the middle. My guess is they only had enough budget to go around, so they put as much as they could onto each creature. And they're like, we don't have enough to put any more hair on the werewolf. That's all you get, right? But eventually, what's a lot of fun about this, as bad as this all sounds, is that about midway through the movie, Naschy's character is the werewolf. He somehow fights the spell that he's under, right? So he then winds up getting into fights with all the creatures, with the exception of the vampire. I don't believe he fights the vampire, but he gets into a fight with the mummy. He gets into a big battle at the end with the Frankenstein monster. And then, of course, at the end, the woman who loves him has to shoot him. Like Chris said, that happens every movie. But it's a lot of fun. If you love the Monster Mash movies, you could tell there's no budget here, but at least you get all these creatures on screen with each other at various points in time. It is pretty fun. It makes no sense whatsoever, but why not? What I always found interesting about a lot of these movies, especially the werewolf series, is that Naschy, a big fan of Lon Chaney Jr. and the Universal films. Now, you would think if he's going to kind of do his own thing 20 years later, right, and start his own horror series, being such a fan of the old films, all of us who love those films love them for many reasons. But one of the things that always sucked about those movies is that they are not very consistent with continuity from film to film. Not even close, right? There's from film to film, say, well, but wait, didn't that happen in the last film? Why is he now like this? All that sort of thing. These movies are even worse. You would have thought that he would have tried to perfect that a little bit and say, you know what, I'm going to have these films make a little more sense and be a little more consistent with continuity from film to film to film. And it's like 100 times worse. So like he'll die in one film and then he'll be alive in the next film, or in the next film, he all of a sudden he's in modern day and then he's back in the 1800s, and it jumps all over the place. But, got vampires everywhere, you got werewolves and whatever. It's a fun movie. Assignment Terror, and this just was the Scorpion releasing, did a really nice job on this. It looks great. So there you go.
Did that remind you kind of like almost like a 50s type movie? Because it just seemed like it was it had a lot of innocence almost to it. It wasn't like, people being ripped off or having their heads ripped off or anything like that. It seemed and as you're saying with the alien part of it, almost Plan 9 from outer space-ish.
Yeah, it's nutty. Yeah, it's definitely nutty. Yeah, there's a total sci-fi element to this particular film, but it's
still fun.
Yeah,
it's still a fun watch. Yeah,
but terrible.
No, terrible. Yeah,
definitely terrible.
Yeah,
and that one is on YouTube as a double feature with Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, and they even have in between they have. Let's go to the lobby to get some treats and things that. All the little trailers and such. So you can watch them all at the same time for over 3 hours.
There you go.
Yeah, and Assignment Terror is a terrible title, but apparently that was the U.S. TV title
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, geez, who would look at that in TV Guide and be
Because
like,
that was Dracula versus Frankenstein, right? Or
Right.
that was
Yeah.
one of the other names.
Which that's a terrible title too, because the Dracula and the Frankenstein monsters are never in the same scene together.
right, yeah,
So
Plus it's
Monsters of
confusing with
Terror. Monsters of Terror sounds better to me.
And
Right.
plus, it's confusing with the other Dracula versus Frankenstein movie with Lon Chaney Jr., which is awesome. for
yes,
how,
but
for
I
how
think
bad
that was a year or two later.
it's like 71.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a Spanish film also?
I thought that was Al Adamson. I
Was it?
thought.
I don't remember.
Yeah, J.
lot.
Carroll Nash is in that as Dr. Frankenstein.
And that was the Dracula with the big mustache, right? If I remember.
Yes.
And the curly hair.
Where and Frankenstein has no arms at the end. He's just,
Yes. I caught that at the drive-in like 2 years ago.
it's so bad, but yet so good.
bad. So
but
good.
yet so good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much sums up all these movies.
Yeah. What do you got for number 2, Chris?
All right, my number 2. This one could be the best of all the werewolf movies. Naschy felt that this was his personal best werewolf movie, and it was a tough one if I was going to put this at number 1 or number 2. But Naschy had made Werewolf vs. the Vampire Woman in 1971, which was a big hit around the world. And he remakes it 10 years later in 1981, when I guess, everybody was into werewolves again with, that was the same year American Werewolf in London and The Howling both came out. And I think Full Moon High was around there. I'm sure there's other werewolf movies that came out that I can't even think of. But he made this movie, which is really well done. But it was not a big hit. But it's basically the same as the first movie, just with a bigger budget, more gore, great, set design and castles. And I'm talking about Night of the Werewolf, aka Return of the Werewolf. And this was released in U.S. theaters. Oh, and here's the Blu-ray. And they do have it right, because he does have this this mask thing, but it's like he's kind of like silver. It really does look like, you can almost be like, oh, that's like a 2-piece where they put it in. This was released in theaters in 1985 under the title The Craving, which I always assumed was just like a knockoff of The Howling. But it's, we've already heard this story a million times. The witch gets sentenced to death. This time she's called Elizabeth Bathory, with her followers are also put to death. Waldemar Dominski's there, who was a werewolf. They put him to death, and then they all come back, 100 years later, and chaos ensues. Even the costume that the main female, the villain, that she wears is identical to the costume that the vampire woman wore in Werewolf vs. the Vampire Woman. But man, there's great gore in this. Elizabeth Bathory has a zombie brother that looks like he's out of the Templar Knights,
Totally.
but so beefed up.
Yep.
But they gave him barely anything to do. Absolutely beautiful girls, really good nudity. I think the makeup was really good. There's one of the craziest scenes of the whole Naschy series. There's a naked girl hanging up by her feet, and they go to, resurrect the Elizabeth Bathory. So they're in the crypt, and they've got the statue which has the mouth open leading into the coffin, and they slit the girl's throat, and they shake her so that all the blood will come out, and it drips into the mouth of the statue, and the dry ice comes out, and they resurrect the vampire. There's just some really, really cool stuff. It's a much better final fight of the werewolf and the vampire woman in this version than the original. They do the slow motion thing with the vampire women, but not as much in this one as they did in the original. And there's more vampire women for Naschy to fight.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 of them, I think.
Yeah, there's 4 or 5 of them. Yeah, and it's really well done. Like I said, it's Naschy's personal favorite of all his werewolf movies, and yeah, I think it's really good. And my buddy Sean and I saw this. God, this must have been about 10 years ago, at the anthology archives in the city in Manhattan. They did a Spanish horror film festival, and we went and like on the same day we saw Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, and we saw that the lesbian vampire movie Vampires, and we saw this a 35 millimeter print of this, and it looked gorgeous up on the screen. But I remember, when we watched it, because Sean had seen it a couple more times than I did, he was like, wait, there was some nudity missing. And it must have been one of those times that the print that they ran was from a different territory, which had some of the clothes scenes. But on the Blu-ray, I have two versions of the Blu-ray, there is lots, and all the nudity's intact.
I think the werewolf makeup or mask or costume, whatever, in this film, it's really good. It reminds me of a cross between Oliver Reed and Curse of the Werewolf, the Hammer,
100%,
with a little bit of the best that Lon Chaney ever looked as the Wolfman back in Jack Pierce days. Yeah.
And I don't know if they did it on purpose, but maybe because he was older. But in this movie, they made like the headpiece a little, I don't know if it's gray or silver, but it looked really good. I mean, I prefer, instead of the ears up here and the mask thing in this, I prefer the furrier hair one. Except in this, I did think it looked great.
Yeah, and great. He had great claws and the gloves or whatever you want to call them.
Great gore. I mean, there's a part where he jumps out like off this like perch onto the vampire woman. Apparently, Naschy wrote, directed, and starred in this movie. Put his own money into it because it was done through his own studio. But it just didn't pay off, and apparently that's what sunk his studio. And apparently he had financial troubles, unfortunately, as a result of this movie, which it sucks because it's a really good movie.
It's probably why he was making 3 movies a year for the rest of his life.
Yeah, right? No doubt.
He was making movies right up until he died, basically.
Oh yeah, and I did see, and to me, this is the end of the vampire series, because I did see he did a couple more after this. I saw the one he did in the 90s, like Cantropus or something, and it was dog shit. And he did 2 more in the 2000s, and I'm sure they're just as bad, if not worse. So I never even bothered with them. But for me, like this is where the bloodline ends. Right here.
Pretty much. Yep.
Jump the wolf.
All right, Craig, number 2.
My number 2, Chris had sort of mentioned it before, but it's from 1972, and it is called Horror Rises from the Tomb. Yeah. This movie introduces the character of Alaric de Marnac, who later returns in a early 1982 movie called Panic Beats, which is the sequel to this movie.
It's also on this Blu-ray.
Yeah. Horror Rises from the Tomb. So this one, Naschy and or Alaric and his wife are executed. This is in the 1400s or so. Naschy for heresy and for all drinking blood, trying to raise the dead, all those things. Naschy is beheaded, and his head and body are buried in separate places. His wife, I believe, is hung upside down and has her throat slashed. Before that happens, the executioner, also played by Naschy, who I believe is supposed to be the brother of Alaric de Marnac, he is cursed by Naschy. Naschy curses Naschy. So now, fast forward to modern times, Naschy, third character that he's playing in this movie, who is the ancestor of Alaric de Marnac. They have a seance to see if they can find the body or the head. They do eventually find the head, and of course they all end up becoming possessed and start murdering the townspeople to turn them into the army of the dead. The effects in this actually were pretty good, with the head of Naschy connecting to the body, and then he could walk. He was able to walk around. It was pretty good. Lots of nudity, lots of hot chicks, just like in
all of them.
Yeah,
just like in most of them. pretty gory and a lot of bloody killings and everything. And the ending scene, of course, where where Naschy is defeated is pretty cool, as his head falls off and rolls down a flight of steps and everything. So it's a pretty, I thought this was a pretty good movie, had a reasonably coherent storyline and blood and boobs. So, it was a good trifecta for Naschy in these movies, and it all adds up to a pretty enjoyable movie. So my number 2, Horror Rises from the Tomb.
And he played dual roles in quite a few films. In fact, the one I was just watching, Vengeance of the Zombies, he plays.
Yeah, that's another one.
Several roles in there as well. Yeah.
But yeah, Horror Rises from the Tomb. I did like that one. That one was pretty good, and that one had really good looking zombies at like the 1 hour mark. Yeah. Yeah. They did kind of look like Romero Fulci zombies.
He'd make them pale, like have pale makeup.
Their eyes were all whited out, which gave them a very creepy look to them.
Yeah. Yeah, but an enjoyable movie, and I did not see the sequel, Panic Beats. That was also one of those, I think, online that it was only in Spanish. So, but maybe after I watch the other movie, maybe I'll give that one a try sometime.
Nice.
Plenty more to watch, right?
Oh God,
yeah.
All right, my number 2, like Chris was saying before, I have a feeling Chris and I had flip-flopped the same 2 picks. I could have gone either way with my 1 and 2. And I think my number 1, which is basically a remake of the one I'm going to talk about right now, I think is a stellar remake. And but both films are a little bit different. They're loosely based on the same storyline. But I'm going to go with 1970. It goes by a couple different titles. Walpurgis Night, Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman, Werewolf Shadow. My Blu-ray is Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman. It's another one of those Spanish import Blu-rays, all in Spanish with English subtitles. This is great. Until I had seen my number 1, I would have said this was easily number 1 for me. A lot of fun. It's creepy. The werewolf action is great. There's a lot of him rampaging around. The vampires are awesome here. It's basically the same storyline that Chris explained about Night of the Werewolf before, but obviously done a decade prior. And, he's just at his rampaging, ripping out throats best. Of course, he gets the chicken.
Drooling everywhere.
Drooling all over the place, growling. This is pretty good werewolf makeup, I think, in this, and the female vampires look great in here too as well. It's just an all-around really good film. This for years was my favorite Naschy film, and it's definitely one of the best in the early part of the series. Out of all the early films, it's definitely really good. So this, I would say if you're going to start anywhere with his films, for the werewolf films, you don't have to watch them in order, because most of them, like I said, there's no consistency from one to the other. This was the first one I ever saw. It's still one of the best ones. So whatever version you get, some places it's called, you can get the old DVD I had, I think was either Shadow of the Werewolf or Werewolf Shadow. Yep. Goes by both. Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman is what you can find if you search far and wide for an import copy. I'm assuming at some point we'll get an actual domestic Blu-ray. Who knows?
I hope,
but we'll see. But yeah, that's a good one. Werewolf versus the Vampire Woman / Shadow of the Werewolf, or Werewolf Shadow. Back to Chris, number 1.
That's my number 1. Pete nailed it. Yeah, that's that was also the first Naschy movie I had ever seen. I remember, seeing it on VHS in the 80s when Anchor Bay did these old DVDs. They came out with Curse of the Devil and Werewolf Shadow, and I looked everywhere. I could not find my DVD of Werewolf Shadow, so I had to watch it online. Yep, there's the Blu-ray for Curse of the Devil, which came after this. But yeah, this one is just my favorite. I mean, I think the other one is a better movie, but this one just hits all the right nostalgia spots for me. I think in this one, I really like how all the vampire women are shot in a slow motion, and there's always tons of dry ice on the ground while they're walking. It just makes it very creepy and very ethereal. It's got the traditional Naschy makeup. There's definitely some implied lesbianism with the girls.
Oh yeah.
Which they, for whatever reason, they dropped in the remake. But yeah, I really like this one. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, he's drooling everywhere. Every time he bites somebody, he doesn't even eat it. He just lets it, just like a huge chunk of meat. He just lets it fall and drip out of his mouth. It's so funny. I guess he's like the least hungry werewolf ever. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, and hopefully someone will put out a nice disc of it. At some point. I mean, it would be great too. I would love a box set. I'd buy them all again if they did a box set of all the werewolf movies, even if they included the last couple stinkers.
Just to have them, right?
I'd have them again. Yeah.
Yeah, because I got to say, was it Shout Factory did a great job on those 2 little box sets. Those old films look amazing.
Yes, yeah. I wish there was a third one, but right, these are a couple of years old, right, Pete? So I can't see them doing another one, right? Because see if I can't see a year on here, but yeah, these got to be a couple of years old.
Yeah, I don't remember. They're at least
got to be 4 or 5 years old, right?
Yeah,
got to be. I mean, they're definitely a couple of years before the pandemic.
Yeah. I had heard that this was all we were going to get. I don't know.
Okay.
That'd be a shame, but whatever. Between that and these couple of Scorpion releasing ones that came out, there's we got a flurry of them for a while, and then it would just kind of stop because Vinegar Syndrome just did the Count Dracula's Great Love, right? They didn't do any other Naschy films, did they?
Yes, that was Vinegar Syndrome. I was going to say, well, right, Vincent Price did a shit ton of movies, and he only got 3 box sets. So if we got 2 from Paul Naschy, that's pretty good. We should almost consider ourselves lucky.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Craig, you're number 1.
My number 1 was Chris's number 5, and it was from 1974, and that is Count Dracula's Great Love. And to mirror what Chris had said earlier, the general plot is a stagecoach that has one. I'm not counting the driver because I forget how he's dispatched, but a stagecoach with 1 man and 4 smoking hot women break down in the middle of the woods, and they make their way to a castle to the owner, who is Naschy, who just happens to be Count Dracula. Each woman is seduced and bitten by Naschy except for one virgin, because Dracula is seeking the rebirth of his daughter, and he has to complete a blood ritual and convince the virgin to voluntarily join him as his bride, which of course she was totally doing. She, as Chris had said, 10 minutes after meeting him, she's saying that she loves him and everything. But lots of nudity and I thought pretty good gore, a reasonably coherent story. Did have some laughs, as Chris had mentioned.
When the girls get dropped,
with girls getting dropped, and which was just something like right out of a comedy and everything. But I cannot stress how hot these 4 women are in the beginning. I mean, the one is. The one's supposed to be kind of like the floozy, right, Chris? She, because she says, "Oh, I wonder if he'll love me. Do you love me because I've been with other men, or something?" And of course, Naschy's like, "Yeah, I'll take you anyway," But and each woman is, and they all have these big gowns on with and everything, which works well.
They're all walking around in high heels all the time.
All the time, yeah. I mean, they all just and some a little bit of light girl on girl action towards the end. But yeah, that is what really got my attention when I was watching this. I was like, usually there was 1 or 2 that are women that are pretty attractive in these movies, and some which are were average or so. But these, all 4 of them, I was just going, wow. He really hats off to the casting department in this, or with choosing these four ladies for this movie. But I thought it was a lot of fun, and good to see again, Naschy being so well-rounded, and being Dracula and the werewolf, and a police inspector, and a rampaging regular guy, and just all these different movies that he's in. He wasn't just a one-note actor. I mean, none of these movies will be mistaken for necessarily for high art, I don't think, or anything, but they are really enjoyable in their own way, and I think he deserves the recognition that he's gotten, especially in Spain, and for just all these enjoyable movies. So, but yeah, number one for me, Count Dracula's Great Love.
Nice.
Ooh. I just ordered the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray.
Yeah, it's a good one. There's a ton of extras. I didn't even
Never
chance
had
to
it,
go through them all. Yeah.
All right, my number one, so kind of gave it away already, but is Night of the Werewolf. Right there, part of this Blu-ray set. Again, basically a loose remake of Werewolf Shadow, Werewolf versus Vampire Women, and I just think it's really well done. It's easily his best looking film, and I'm a werewolf guy, always have been. I think it's the best looking werewolf, and it's just a really, really fun film. And there are elements that are very similar to the original film, but it's obviously updated more with more budget. I think it really works, and I think I rewatched both of these in the last week, and I think I get a tiny bit more enjoyment out of the newer one, so that's why I put it at number one. But you can't go wrong with either one of them. They're both really, really good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like in the original, they talk about the people being put to death, and then in the remake, you see them being put to death. In the original, they stumble across the body that has the silver cross in it, and the girl pulls it out and happens to just nick herself and drips the blood. Whereas in this one, they've got the naked girl swinging by her feet, and they slit her throat, and so they redid it all, but they made it bigger.
And is this? I'm trying to. God, I watched so much of these films over the last couple of weeks. Is this the film too, where the one girl takes the silver cross and holds it up to Naschy as the werewolf, and he shrinks away and goes back? Meanwhile, I don't remember if it was in this film or one of the other ones. It's in one of these, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not supposed to do anything to a werewolf. Crosses don't have anything to do with that.
Well, in this one, it definitely does.
I guess. But that kind of Templar zombie creature is pretty cool.
That guy.
I totally wish there was more of that.
That's the funny thing too, because they have one in the original, and he's pretty scary.
Yeah.
But he's like thinner and almost looks like a big puppet. But then in the remake, they have him. He's fucking jacked.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, I wouldn't want to get eaten by him or punched by him. But in both versions, like, they have this cool character, and they kill him in like 60 seconds. I was like,
Kind of a waste. Waste. You guys got any honorable mentions or honorable stinkers?
I thought Vengeance of the Zombies sucked. I thought Crimson sucked.
Yeah, that was it was very confusing too. I didn't really understand what the plot was with that one.
But I did like Fury of the Wolfman. Human Beasts was really weird.
That is weird,
but kind of interesting. I kind of like that one.
I liked Dr. Jekyll y El Hombre Lobo.
This was really good.
That was actually pretty good. I like Naschy when he becomes Mr. Hyde. He sort of looks like a goth rocker, with like his
kind of long hair, right?
But no, I thought that one was pretty good. That's why I said my list was a little contrarian. Trademark Martin Popoff too. I had no werewolf movies in my top 5, despite him making all these werewolf movies. However, good. I did enjoy Dr. Jekyll y El Hombre Lobo, but one that I did not like, which was I don't even know if I finished it. It was called Devil's Possessed. Ooh, not good.
Yeah,
not good.
I didn't like Beast and the Magic Sword, which was the werewolf movie after Night of the Werewolf, and Howl of the Devil. I thought that was a shitter too, where he plays
Yeah, I went and bought this, and it's not very
Yeah.
good. He plays like he used to be a TV
Yes,
star who
horror
played all the
actor,
monsters.
so he
and-
plays all the monsters.
Yeah.
And I
And
mentioned
his
the one.
son is like keeps having these imaginations that his father keeps revisiting. It's just weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
He plays twin
Monroe's
brothers in
in
this,
it,
right? So he
too.
plays dual
Yep.
role as well.
Dual role again. Hooks up with Caroline Monroe, who looks awesome.
Yeah,
She
but
never
then
gets
it's not,
nude.
it wasn't, but I tried to watch that too, but again, not in English and with without English subtitles. So that one I skipped, but I chose a good one to watch in pure Spanish. So and I guess according to what you guys are saying, I didn't miss much with that.
No. There's a lot of nudity though in Howl of the Devil.
but
And
not,
Lycanthropus,
not from Carolyn Monroe, right?
not for Caroline Monroe, no.
Yeah.
And Lycanthropus, that was the one in 1996 or 97. I really hated that one because, of course, Naschy's really getting old. But the way they did it, he has barely any makeup on. It kind of reminded me of what is it? Was it Werewolf of London? Where he had like a beard and a little bit of fur and fangs, and that's it. Like all his skin was exposed. That's what it looked like for me, and I was like, "Oh, this sucks."
Well, that was kind of like Fury the Wolfman. That's him right there. It's like you could see way too much of his face. And this is the film where I was talking about. They did, especially in high definition, they did this one close up, and he's like this face after he turns into the werewolf, and he opens his mouth and shows his teeth, and you could totally see like where the fake fangs end and his real teeth begin. I'm like, oh man, that who let that one get by, right? But yeah.
Well, they were making all these movies, fast and.
How many movies did he make in 1973? What, like 10?
Oh,
I mean, I'm going through this and it was like, man, he was busy. I mean, he'd make like in the course of like 3 years, he must have made like 15 movies.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
It's crazy. I'm looking at it right now, and there's a shit ton. The Great Love of Count Dracula, Horror Rise from the Tube. This is 72. Hunchback in the Morgue, Orgy of the Dead. Rebellion of the Dead Woman, that's all in 72. Return of Walpurgis in 73. Revenge of the Mummy in 73. A Dragonfly for Each Corpse in 73. Killer is One of 13 73. The Rats Don't Sleep at Night in 73. Tarzan and King Solomon's Mine in 73. That's like what, 10 movies in the span of 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
He probably couldn't even watch them back to see if they were any good, because he probably didn't have the time.
He had no time. So he probably hadn't seen half of these films that he did right after he did them.
And a lot of them had the same director too, Leon
Klimovsky. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them, but quite a few of them had the same guy directing too.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely seemed to work with a lot of the same actors, and I would imagine some of the same crew over and over again.
Yeah. There's a lot of familiar faces in these, which just like in Hammer and Amicus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Universal and a lot of ladies, a lot of lovely ladies.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So there you have it, everybody. Some good and bad, and well, depending on what you like, you may think all these are bad, but I think it's safe to assume that these are not cinematic classics, like Craig said earlier, but they're a lot of fun. These fall under the kind of so bad they're really good type of things, but some are a little better than others. But there's a ton of other ones that we never even mentioned today. So if you are into Paul Naschy and you've got some favorites, put them down in the comments below. And till next time. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here all together all the damn time. For Craig Kaminski and Chris Allo, I am Pete Pardo. Happy St. Paddy's Day, everybody. What's left of it. And we'll see you next week here on the Monsters Den. Take care. Bye-bye.